Let's be clear about something right from the start. Because if we don't get this right, everything else in this conversation collapses. Being a good person is not the same thing as being a too nice person. Those are not synonyms. Somewhere along the way, we confuse morality with passivity. And in 2026, that confusion is costing people their peace, their progress, and their power. A too nice person is not kind by choice. They're kind by fear, fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood. And psychologically speaking, when fear is the driver, virtue stops being virtue. It becomes a coping mechanism. You're not saying yes because you believe in it. You're saying yes because you don't trust yourself to survive the consequences of saying no. Now, here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want to hear the world doesn't reward intention, it rewards behavior. You can have the purest heart in the room, but if your behavior communicates weakness, indecision, or self-erasure, that's how you'll be treated. Not because people are evil, but because humans subconsciously organize themselves around signals. Confidence is a signal. Boundaries are a signal. Self-respect is a signal. Chronic niceness without limits signals availability without cost, and anything without cost is rarely valued. Philosophically, this goes all the way back to Aristotle. He talked about virtue as the mean between extremes. Courage, for example, sits between cowardice and recklessness. Kindness is no different. Too little kindness becomes cruelty. Too much kindness, detached from self-respect, becomes self-betrayal. And self-betrayal is not noble, it's corrosive. Over time, it doesn't just drain you, it reshapes how you see yourself. You start feeling invisible, resentful, exhausted, and then you wonder why you're burned out, even though you're doing everything right. In 2026, this is no longer just a personal issue, it's a survival issue. We're living in an era of accelerated demands, more noise, more competition, more people pulling at your attention, your time, your emotional labor. If you don't define your limits, someone else will define them for you, and they will not do it in your favor. That's not cynicism, that's reality. Psychology tells us something powerful here. People treat you the way you consistently allow them to treat you. Not once, not occasionally, consistently. Every time you swallow discomfort to keep the peace, you teach others that your discomfort is acceptable. Every time you over-explain instead of stating your position, you teach others that your stance requires permission. And over time, that lesson becomes embedded in the relationship. Now, hear this carefully, because this is where people get defensive. This is not about becoming harsh, cold, or selfish. This is about becoming whole. A whole person can be kind without being weak. A whole person can be generous without being depleted. A whole person can listen without surrendering their spine. Eric Thomas often talks about hunger, not just the desire to succeed, but the willingness to endure discomfort for growth. And this is one of those discomforts. The discomfort of being misunderstood when you stop over-accommodating. The discomfort of silence after you say no. The discomfort of realizing some people only like the version of you that never challenged them. That discomfort is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're graduating. Being too nice feels safe in the short term, but it's dangerous in the long term. It delays your growth. It distorts your relationships. It teaches you to measure your worth by how little trouble you cause instead of how much truth you live in. And a life built on avoidance will always feel smaller than the potential inside you. So as we move into 2026, the question isn't, how can I be nicer? The question is, how can I be more honest with myself and with others? Because honesty requires courage. Boundaries require courage. Self-respect requires courage. And courage, not niceness, is what allows kindness to mean something. Here's the thought I want to leave you with. If your kindness is costing you your voice, your energy, or your identity, it's no longer kindness, it's a warning. And the moment you listen to that warning is the moment your life starts to change. Now, Once you understand that being too nice is not a moral achievement, but a liability, the next truth becomes impossible to ignore. People do not respect you for sacrificing yourself. They benefit from it, yes. They may even praise you for it. But respect, that's a different currency altogether. Respect is not built on how much of yourself you give away. Respect is built on what you protect. Psychologically, human beings are wired to pay attention to consistency and limits. When someone never pushes back, never disagrees, never asserts their needs, the brain doesn't interpret that as generosity. It interprets it as instability. Not emotional instability, but value instability. If you don't defend your own time, your own standards, your own well-being, the unconscious messages, these things don't matter. And if they don't matter to you, they won't matter to anyone else. This is where many well-meaning people get trapped. They believe sacrifice will earn them appreciation, loyalty, or love. So they stay late. They say yes when they mean no. They overfunction in relationships, workplaces, and families. And for a while, it feels rewarding. People thank you. They lean on you. They tell you how reliable you are. But notice something. The moment you stop overgiving, the tone changes. The appreciation fades. The disappointment shows up. And that's when the illusion breaks. What you realize is this: some people didn't value you. They valued your availability. Philosophically, this goes back to dignity. Kant argued that human beings should never be treated merely as means to an end, but always as ends in themselves. When you consistently sacrifice yourself to maintain approval, you participate in your own reduction. You turn yourself into a tool, useful, dependable, and ultimately replaceable. And no one truly respects what they see as a tool. They rely on it, they use it, but they don't revere it. Eric Thomas often says they don't respect what you don't inspect. And that applies directly here. When you don't inspect how others engage with you, when you don't correct, clarify, or confront, you silently co-sign behavior that diminishes you. Not because people are malicious, but because human systems naturally expand until they meet resistance. If there's no resistance, they keep taking. And here's the part that stings. The resentment you feel later is not proof that others wronged you. It's evidence that you abandoned yourself earlier. Respect erodes not in dramatic moments, but in small, repeated concessions you made to avoid discomfort. Each time you thought, it's fine, I'll handle it, when it wasn't fine. Each time you minimized your needs so someone else could stay comfortable. Over time, you don't just lose respect from others, you lose it internally, and that internal loss is the most dangerous kind. In 2026, respect will not come from being agreeable. It will come from being grounded, from being predictable in your standards, from letting people know without drama or apology what you will and will not tolerate. The most respected individuals are rarely the loudest or the most aggressive. They're the clearest. Their yes means yes. Their no doesn't come with a novel attached. Their presence carries weight because it's not constantly negotiable. And let's be honest, when you finally stop sacrificing yourself, some people will be disappointed, not because you changed, but because the arrangement changed. And that disappointment is not your responsibility. Growth always disrupts comfort. Evolution always challenges entitlement. If someone only feels good around you when you are shrinking, their discomfort is not a sign you were wrong. It's a sign you're reclaiming space. This is where courage shows up again. The courage to be consistent, the courage to let others adjust, the courage to be respected more than you are liked, because liking is emotional and unstable. Respect is structural. It holds under pressure. It survives disagreement. It deepens over time. So don't measure your worth by how indispensable you are to others. Measure it by how intact you remain while contributing. If helping costs you your dignity, it's too expensive. If sacrifice destroys your self-respect, it's not noble, it's unsustainable. By the time you reach this point in the conversation, something should be clicking. You start realizing that the issue was never kindness itself. It was the absence of boundaries. And this is where many people hesitate because they've been conditioned to believe a lie that boundaries are rude, aggressive, or selfish. They're not. Boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They're lines meant to keep you intact. Psychologically, boundaries are how the self maintains coherence. Without them, the mind lives in a constant state of negotiation, negotiating time, energy, emotions, values, and that constant negotiation creates cognitive fatigue. You're tired not because you're weak, but because you're overexposed. Everyone has access to you. Everyone has a claim. Everyone gets a vote. And when everyone gets a vote, your life becomes a committee instead of the direction. In 2026, clarity is currency. People who can define their limits, comma, why consistently will outperform those who are endlessly flexible. Not because they work harder, but because their energy isn't leaking in every direction. Boundaries concentrate force. They allow you to say, this is where I stop and this is where I begin. Without hostility, without drama, without apology. Philosophically, boundaries are an act of self-recognition. Think about it. You don't set boundaries for things that have no value. You don't protect what you don't respect. So when you fail to set boundaries, the underlying message is not humility, it's self-dismissal. You are implicitly saying, my time is optional, my emotions are negotiable, my limits are flexible for everyone except me. That mindset slowly erodes identity. Eric Thomas often talks about discipline as a form of self-love. Boundaries are discipline in social form. They are you loving yourself enough to endure temporary discomfort instead of long-term regret. Because make no mistake, every boundary you avoid today becomes resentment tomorrow. And resentment is far more destructive than a clear, calm no. Here's where people get it twisted. Setting boundaries doesn't require confrontation every time. It requires consistency. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to explain your childhood. You don't have to justify your humanity. Sometimes the most powerful boundary is simply not responding the way you used to, not rushing, not fixing, not absorbing responsibility that isn't yours. And yes, some people will call you distant. Some will say you've changed. What they really mean is you're no longer as accessible as you were before. But accessibility is not a moral obligation. Availability is a choice. And when you choose availability without limits, you end up unavailable to yourself. There's a deep psychological principle at work here. People feel safest around those who are predictable in their standards. When your boundaries are clear, others don't have to guess. They know where you stand. Ironically, this creates healthier relationships, not colder ones. Chaos comes from ambiguity, not from firmness. When you are vague, people pee. When you are clear, people adjust. Boundaries also teach people how to treat you without you having to lecture them. Your behavior does the teaching. When you stop answering work messages at midnight, you teach people your time matters. When you stop tolerating disrespect disguised as jokes, you teach people your dignity is not optional. When you say no once and don't renegotiate it 10 times, you teach people that your word holds weight. And let's address the fear underneath all this. The fear is not really about being rude. The fear is about loss of approval, loss of connection, loss of belonging. But here's the truth most people discover too late. Relationships that require you to abandon yourself were never safe to begin with. They were conditional, and boundaries don't destroy healthy connections. They expose unhealthy ones. In 2026, emotional intelligence will not be measured by how accommodating you are, but by how well you manage access to yourself. You don't owe everyone your energy. You don't owe everyone your time. You don't owe everyone an explanation. Respectful restraint is not selfishness. It's sustainability. So start small. Say no without adding an apology. Pause before agreeing. Let silence do some of the work. Feel the discomfort and don't run from it. That discomfort is the sound of your nervous system recalibrating to self-respect. And here's the thought I want you to carry with you. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about refusing to abandon yourself. And the moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment your life starts to feel like it finally belongs to you. By the time we arrive here, the pattern should be unmistakable. When you strip everything down, the overgiving, the lack of respect, the missing boundaries, it all traces back to one central tension, the battle between approval and self-respect. And in 2026, this battle will define the trajectory of more lives than talent, intelligence, or opportunity ever will. Approval is seductive because it feels like safety. When people like you validate you and include you, your nervous system relaxes. You feel seen, you feel accepted. But psychologically, approval is external and unstable. It belongs to other people's moods, needs, insecurities, and expectations. The moment your behavior no longer serves their comfort, approval evaporates. And if your identity is built on something that can disappear overnight, you will live in a constant state of self-monitoring. Self-respect, on the other hand, is internal and cumulative. It doesn't spike like approval. It compounds. Every time you tell the truth when it's uncomfortable, every time you act in alignment with your values instead of your fear, every time you choose long-term integrity over short-term acceptance, you are making a deposit. And over time, those deposits become confidence that doesn't need permission. Philosophically, this is the difference between living as an object and living as an agent. When you chase approval, you let others define the terms of your worth. You adjust your voice, your boundaries, your beliefs to remain acceptable. You become reactive. But when you choose self-respect, you operate from authorship. You decide who you are before the world votes on it. And paradoxically, that's when respect from others actually begins to show up. Not because you asked for it, but because it's recognizable. Eric Thomas talks a lot about identity before success, knowing who you are when nobody's clapping. This is that work, the quiet work, the invisible work, the moments where you could perform for applause, but instead you stay aligned, where you could explain yourself endlessly, but instead you stand firm, where you could shrink to stay rooted, but instead you risk standing alone. And let's be honest. Choosing self-respect will cost you something. It may cost you relationships that were built on convenience. It may cost you invitations. It may cost you being misunderstood. But what it gives you back is far more valuable. Congruence. When your inner world matches your outer behavior, your energy stabilizes. You stop feeling fragmented. You stop waking up resentful, tired, or vaguely dissatisfied without knowing why. There's a psychological phenomenon called cognitive dissonance. The stress we feel when our actions contradict our beliefs. Chronic people pleasers live in a constant state of dissonance. They believe one thing, but behave another way to stay liked. Over time, that gap creates anxiety, depression, and emotional numbness. Self-respect closes that gap. It allows your actions to tell the truth, even when your voice shakes. In 2026, authenticity will not be a branding strategy. It will be a survival skill. The world is moving too fast and the pressure is too high for you to keep performing versions of yourself that aren't real. You don't have the energy for it. You don't have the time, and you certainly don't have the mental space. Self-respect simplifies life. It reduces internal negotiations. It makes decisions cleaner, even when they're harder. Here's something most people never realize. When you choose approval over self-respect, you're still making a choice. You're just outsourcing it. You're letting other people decide what you're allowed to be. Self-respect is not arrogance. It's not superiority. It's the quiet decision to live by standards you don't abandon when things get uncomfortable. And when you start doing that, something powerful happens. You stop asking, will they like me? And start asking, can I live with this version of myself? That question changes everything. It changes how you speak, how you work, how you love, how you leave situations that no longer honor who you're becoming. Some people will never approve of the self-respecting version of you. That's okay. They were never meant to. Your job is not to be universally liked. Your job is to be internally aligned. Approval fades, applause quiets. But the person you have to live with day after day, decision after decision, is you. So here's the final thought I want you to sit with, not just here when you choose self-respect. You don't lose people, you lose illusions. And what you gain is something no crowd can give you and no rejection can take away, a life that feels honest, grounded, and fully your own.